lecture series, and also the last in a series of presentations, seminars, and events in a DRL series called Computation and Urbanism. We're really very pleased to have Marie-Ange Brayer come to the AA. We've been trying to get Marie-Ange over to the AA for ages now. In terms of a series on computation and urbanism, or just broadly computation as a kind of driver of architectural production, I think Marie-Ange as a curator certainly fits very nicely to be able to kind of end the series. The series dealt broadly with the relationship of computational procedures, design tools in a contemporary sense, and the relationship to the production of urbanism, but architectural space. And Marie-Ange's role as a curator, I think, is clearly able to kind of summarize a lot of the topics introduced by several others over the series. Marie-Ange has a kind of illustrious career as a curator over the last 11 years, I'd say, as the director of FRAC, the Fonds Régional d'Architecture Contemporaine, or Art Contemporain, Regional Foundation of Contemporary Art, one of the many in France. Marie-Ange has directed the one in Orléans, and has been initially with Frédéric Migarou, the organizers of a series of unbelievable events called Archelab, a yearly event in Orléans that I think, if one compares to maybe the middle of the 20th century, it's probably, in my mind, the series of events that compare to SIAM and other kind of events that gathered together people from all over the world. Some of these Archelab events had hundreds of people going to them, hundreds of people exhibiting, conferences that lasted days. They were really quite special events, and definitely to the dedication of Marie-Ange to make them so special. Marie-Ange is going to talk today about the architectural model. I guess we're starting in the old days, but in a way that the architectural model has transformed from how architects perceive the architectural model and use models from either representation more towards kind of active experimentation, and ways in which the model is either produces a kind of range of multiplicities and diversities of potential output, ways of understanding, in Marie-Ange's terms, of the architectural model as genetic and also phylogenetic, which is the title of Marie-Ange's lecture tonight, The Architectural Model as Phylogenetic Machine. Please join me in welcoming Marie-Ange Brayer.
Thank you very much. You will tell if is it okay with the micro? Yes. Thank you very much for your invitation, Tom, and also Brett. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. And please do apologize my English. As you know, I am French speaking, and I prepare a text, and I will not really read, but yes, I will also use this text, of course. And as Tom told you, I am director of the FRAC Centre collection, Centre Fonds Régional d'Art Contemporain du Centre, which is a collection of art and architecture. Now we have more than 800 maquettes, more than 15,000 drawings. I would say it's a very important collection dealing with experimentation and research, prospective architecture from the 50s up to now. And this collection has been developed from the early 90s by Frédéric Migarou first, now chief curator at the Centre Pompidou, and me, and became one of maybe the most important collection for this relationship between art and architecture. And so my talk will be illustrated by mainly by project in the FRAC Centre collection in Orléans. Of course, not this painting, which is an Italian painting of the Renaissance, where you can see Michelangelo showing a model to the Pope. My talk will be about the model, the use of the model, the status of the model, and how it changes over the centuries, but of course mostly today. As you know, architectural model has an ambivalent status because it's between process and form, between conceptualization and referent. So for the model, everything is important. You know, the scale, the material, the method of representation, and everything is important. And since the use of computer-assisted design technologies, we can make the constat of a radical paradigm shift for this instrument that is the model. And the model has become really something, a vector of experimentation. Alors for centuries, the model, the status of the model, I would say has been a subject for theories about representation. It was always considered in an analogical way. And of course, even if it is impossible to retrace the story of architectural models, I will just mention some points. As you know, scale models appeared in the antiquity. We can find some examples in Rome, in the Greek period, the Hellenistic period. And during the Middle Age, we can find life-size patterns and also votive models. And the models used to convey, I would say, information from the architect to the masons. In Italy, the architectural model will become very important, of course, in the Renaissance period. And it is also at the same period, at the 15th century, that the architect and the term architect in the modern sense will be used. And so the model really spread over, and also the notion of project. And the modern notion of project also came from the Renaissance period. And at this time also the clients of the architect were increasingly individuals, and they wanted to have a very concrete vision of the object to be built, and asked to the architect at that time to have a very detailed model. And the models also serve to visualize all the invention of the architect. And you surely know the models of Brunelleschi for the Dome of Firenze. It was really sometimes a fight between the architects because the model was very important in also a political way. And as you know, at this time in the Renaissance, the model were mostly in wood and in a very big scale. In some model, you can really have a kind of human size. You can really enter in the model. At the same time, in France, you have Philibert Delorme, who will write about the use of models. And the model is really the control of the production. And there are many texts at that time about the relationship between theory and practice. And so since the Renaissance, the model has been used as a tool for projection. And it is a guide to construction in construction. And for a long time, architectural models share the same status as castings also, having to do with the generic notion of reproduction. I will go quickly through the 18th century, but it is a very important century, and at that time, in fact, the notion of drawing will be very important. You know, the Carceri by Piranesi, and the architectural drawing at the 18th century will have a new independence and become something also autonomous. And what we can notice also at the 18th century is I would say the development of salon, of exhibition, of architecture. For instance, at the Royal Academy in London, also in France, you can have many salons where you will see architectural models, paintings, and it is something new at that time. And what is also interesting to notice for the 19th century is the collection of models. But to collect models seems to put them in cabinet de curiosité. And you have in France Louis-François Cassas, who is a collector, and you will find models, castings, models in cork, and it's similar to the reconstitution of the antique. So there is no difference between the antique, the moulage, and the maquette. And among all these things, you find archaeological objects and you find models. And it was something very specific to the end of the 18th century and also the 19th century. And so over the centuries, the model is still a tool for representation, it's still a tool related to the mimesis and related to the notion of representation. And at the 19th century, it will become something very important in terms of statics, engineering, of course, and will become a mechanical model. And with, of course, operative capacities. And among the most famous model, we can quote, for instance, Gaudi, who did completely very interesting models using sand, using rocks, different kind of materials, experimenting many things. Or also Le Récollet, who designed soap bubble models during the 30s. And then a new use of model will be developed at that time. And also the status of the drawing will change at the 19th century with, for instance, Durand, that you know surely, which will develop a typology and will introduce a rationalization also of drawing. And in France, but of course it will be very influent. And the drawing will change, and the status of the drawing will become a status of prescription, and something, I would say, more related to rationalized production. And of course, I go very quickly because there are so many things to tell. I will go also quickly on the avant-garde period, but it's important just to tell a few words. You have the Planet or the Architekton by Malevich. This period, the modernist period, is very important for the model because you will have a use of the model in art and also in architecture. You will find the model in all the modernist movements, suprematism, constructivism, the style in the Netherlands. And you will see that the model will really go over across all the fields, painting, sculpture, design, and architecture. And at the time, the concept of the project will, I would say, take on a new reflexive dimension. You will see mostly model, plaster model, white model, a kind of white object that we will find. And at that time, here is Constant. I will tell a few words about Constant. The Malevich, Tatlin, all these artists will use the model, and the model will, I would say, allow to go over a subjectivist approach of art, and will be very important in this way. And what we can see to finish with the modernist period, the model also will change and will become a tool for mediating architecture. You surely know all the models by Le Corbusier, and Le Corbusier published many articles. You have a famous photograph where Le Corbusier showing a model. And the model will be important for the mediatization of architecture. And Beatrice Colomina wrote different essays about this notion. And so my talk will be on the post-war period until now. And at the time, in the 50s, you will find a lot of architectural experimentation. And I would say also a practice, a transversal practice of art and architecture. And the model will become a critical object and something which will question also, I would say, the very foundations of architecture. And the maquette will become a critical object, a speculative object, questioning architecture, and open new way for the architects. And also for the artist, I chose to talk about Constant. Constant was not an architect, as you know, but an artist. And in the 50s, he developed a completely astonishing project, New Babylon, in the context of situationism with Guy Debord. And New Babylon is maybe the first world city network on a planetary scale. And with Constant and New Babylon, what is very important, and you don't have any more architecture, but you have a kind of artificial environment. And you can see that the model will also completely change in its status, because you have here the sectors, they are all very transparent models. And it's because you have a kind of nomadism in the New Babylon project. All the people are walking through cities. They never stop, and sometimes they stop in this kind of sectors. And what is important is that architecture will elaborate a specific atmosphere. And that notion of atmosphere will become very interesting. And this model is called le spatiovore, that is to say, the space eater. And it's a very famous model of Constant. And what is also interesting, when Constant organized exhibition of these models, he used slides. So he projects slides with the models, so you don't have a fixed vision of the models. They are moving, so you can see many different views, slides of one model and different point of view. And so all the time the model is in transformation. And it really expresses this idea of disorientation that Constant was developing at that time. And Constant, the New Babylon project, was also, I would say, the first artificial environment, and also something completely transitory, which is ephemeral, completely ephemeral. And for Constant, again, the architect no longer exists. The architect is just there to create ambiance in French, and to create it in an interactive mode also. And all these ideas are, of course, very interesting if you look at architecture today. In the 50s, in the use of models, you will have a large movement which is called architecture sculpture. It will be developed in France with André Bloch, for instance, who was the editor of L'Architecture d'aujourd'hui. And André Bloch was, of course, very close to Frédéric Kissler, organic architecture that you know, for instance, with this endless house. And so he developed this kind of sculpture habitacle. It is both a sculpture and at the same time a model of architecture. And it could be a prototype for an architecture at the real scale, at the scale 1:1, that you can use. And André Bloch realized in his villa in Meudon this kind of sculpture habitacle at the real scale. And it's something still existing that you can visit. At this period, there is also another way to approach the model. Is of course the structural model. Here it's David Georges Emmerich, which was a French representative of the structural morphology in the 50s, 60s. Of course, closely linked to Buckminster Fuller, Le Récollet, all this experimentation. And you can see in this special structure, self-tensing structure, that the model will be taken into account just for its structure. It's nothing more than a structural function. What will change also in the 60s is the industrialization, because many architects will develop plastic prototype, plastic models, and they want to use it in a way to as prefabricated elements. Here you have Chanéac modules which are empiled, and of course it's in the way to use it to industrialize all these all these models. As you can see, it's a real prototype made of plastic that Chaniac developed at that time. And so the model will change. The status now it's very different because it's more close to a prototype, something that you can repeat, and you can repeat through the factory. And you can, of course, use a truck and move this kind of structure. And so this module will be important at that time also. Pascal Ozerman, it's another model that we have also in the FRAC collection with a three-dimensional structure. Here, Antilovag. Antilovag is famous for his bubbles architecture. And it's funny because he built a model at the real scale to convince a client, and he's still living in this model. And you know, he used concrete, sprayed concrete, and he built the model of a house, and he's still living in it to convince the client that it was possible to build the concrete bubbles. And it was in the late 60s. Now I will have a look through the radical architecture period, and then also the notion of model was completely transformed. What is now very different is that the model is not anymore the anticipation of the project. Here it's Villa Rosa by Coupy-Moelblau, 67-69. And the models are not anymore the project elements for the architect, but they will become tools to attack all the normative codes of architecture. And as you know, you will see many groups everywhere in Europe, in Austria, in Italy, in Japan, and it's Coupy-Moelblau in Austria, Archizoom, Superstudio in Italy. And they were criticized this notion of representation through the model. So you can see this model of Villa Rosa, also this drawing. And for this kind of project, you don't have anymore, I would say, a build object, which is architecture. You have a technological device, and as you know, maybe Villa Rosa was a prototype, an inflatable structure. And in this inflatable structure, all people were invited to come and to go inside, and it was with different sensation, and it was something completely interactive, an interactive environment. And you see the people wearing helmets, which kind of prosthetic also brain. And this prototype and structures that Coupy-Moelblau at that time built were a kind of installation, a kind of performance that they were developing. And what was important was the relationship between the body and the architecture, how the body will react to architecture. And I would say that the model was just a step in a transformational process to at the end have a performance, an installation, something completely interactive. So the maquette can become a kind of inhabitable prototype. And it was the same for Hasrucker Co. It is a very famous project called Pneumacosm, which used also the air as the material. And again, Hasrucker Co. were doing performance in the urban space. And they develop a conception of architecture like a cell, and also a biological organism. You can see on this very beautiful collage this close relationship between biology and organism and architecture. And everything is, I would say, in a continuous transformation. So you can plug this unit, and you can plug, unplug, and use it in different way. And again, they are interactive architecture or process. And here it is a megastructure, one of the most famous. Rainer Banham told that Ragnitz by Alfred Hutte, Günther Dominik was one of the most famous megastructures. And in the late 60s, you will find this also research. And again, there is a change in the way of looking at the model, because here the model is the infrastructure of the city. And you can see the city, the megastructure, and you can recognize that it is, of course, prefabricated. Of course, it's linked to industrialization. And again, the city can extend ad infinitum. There is no end, as you know. There is no form a priori. And the work or the project is more an environment. And we find, again, this notion. Here you have the Superstudio histogram. So I was telling that at that time there is a new critical dimension related to the status of drawing, the status of model, and we can find an iconoclastic attitude towards architecture and provocation, and we will find it in the Italian groups, Superstudio, Archizoom, because they will contest the language of architecture and really pushing back modernism and to, I would say, something extreme. And architecture can become a conceptual praxis. You know, from that time, architecture can be just a document, just an article, just a statement, a conceptual statement. And installation, performance are also a conceptual praxis for the architect. And there is a kind of a fight or crisis against the rationalist system that you will find at that time. And the model and the drawing will become a tool of criticizing architecture, of criticizing all, I would say, the representational codes of architecture. And of course, the histogram of Superstudio are an example, a good example. You can see the grid, and the grid will cover everything. The grid is covering the territory, the earth, everything. You cannot know if it is a model, if it is, I would say, a drawing, an installation, and there is something completely ambiguous about the status of this installation. And the project is not anymore a projection. And Superstudio, of course, play a lot with this idea in the histogram. And so all the projectual tools that we know, model, drawing, are now completely inoperative. They don't signify nothing, as you can see in this completely, I would say, ironical work, installation by Franco Raggi. It was a performance that he did with some friends in the late 60s, and they just put some branch and they paint a great temple, and they were joking about the Vitruvian order, the Greek temple. And so it was a kind of joke, but of course it was a criticism of architecture, of all the representational system of architecture. And of course it was a kind of clin d'œil to la cabane primitive de la Belle Auger in the 18th century, and I would say all the origin of the architecture. And it is very interesting because we cannot tell if it is a model or not. It is a kind of hypertrophied model, and it's really, really funny. And Franco Raggi, who was working for Casabella at that time, the editor was Alessandro Mendini, and Franco Raggi really deconstruct the notion of model in this kind of installation. And so all these radical movements, Superstudio, Archigram, that we just have seen, will put the accent of the notion of installation, what is ephemeral, the performance, of course, and what is important is I would say, the present, the notion of the present, because everything will be inscribed in the time, which is now the future, but really the present. And what will be also very interesting in all these conceptual works of the 60s is that the model will refer to the process of the architect more than to the things to build. And of course, I will tell a few words about Peter Eisenman work. You know that Peter Eisenman developed houses from the 60s up to the late 80s. And Peter Eisenman put the emphasis also on the idea of morphogenesis. And in the practice of Peter Eisenman, the model will be important, but I would say something self-constitute. We can see here, for instance, this drawing. It is the Guardiola house. It's the latest house in '86. And Peter Eisenman will put the emphasis on the conceptual autonomy of the object. And you know that he will build homes that resemble model that will resemble drawings, and he will really blur this distinction between drawing, representation, construction, and through also axonometric drawings. And in this Guardiola house, you have, yes, a strong relationship between the drawing and between also all the models which follow. Because the model will follow all the structural lines of the drawings, and as you can see in this model. And for Peter Eisenman, the maquette, the model, will have a new conceptual dimension. And the maquette will also open to a non-specific scale of architecture, and then will be developed in all the theories by Peter Eisenman. Of course, an ambiguous object is this one. In '81, the Teatro del Mondo by Aldo Rossi. Because we don't know if it is an hypertrophied maquette or small architecture. It's very strange. And with this architecture floating on the Venice Lagoon in '81 in Venice. And Daniel Libeskind wrote about this work, that it was inhabited by the demon, le démon de l'analogie. He was quoting Mallarmé, the demon of analogy. And Aldo Rossi was telling that it was a place of pure representation. And so the Teatro del Mondo is an architecture which is also a theoretical object, and which is also a speculation on the codes of representation. And architecture has a status of the image and tends to resemble to a miniature object and to something fictionalized, which could be the model. And here it's the model, which is in the Centre Pompidou collection with some other drawings. We just have one drawing in the FRAC collection. For the deconstruction period, this project is also very interesting because, you know, it was Coupimol-Blau, the open house in '82, and it was a drawing with the eyes closed. So it was a kind of automatic writing, a kind of projection of the unconscious directly on the page. So there is no more anticipation, there is no more program for architecture, but just this process to be projected, but completely literally on the paper. And there is no more projectual anticipation, of course, in this kind of project. And it's not project anymore, but just projection. And you have this very small model, and it is really at the same size as the drawing. So if you put the drawing and just beside the model, they have exactly the same size. So you have the projection of the inconscious with the drawing, and the model will be exactly the same. Because for Coupimol-Blau, the model has to keep this, I would say, wild energy that they were developing through this literal projection. And of course, the result of the open house, there is nothing more to do with the idea of composition, because it was just this blind drawing which was at the origin of the project. Another very interesting use of maquette is, of course, Daniel Libeskind. Because Daniel Libeskind used really architectural model as a kind of Gesamtkunstwerk, a kind of total artwork. And here it's Berlin City Age. It's a project just before the fall of the wall in '87. And it is very strange because you have a collage of text, you have collage of images from books, and there is an ambiguous status between the drawing, between the collage, between the model, between also the reality of the construction. And for Daniel Libeskind, the maquette is something completely autonomous in the process of the architect. And the model can develop something completely in itself. And so this drawing, this collage, will be really the interface between the model and the city, between reality also and representation. And then Daniel Libeskind was talking about the maquette as des machines à penser, thought machines. So it was something helping to design, helping to think. Tchoumi, le parc de la Villette, of course we are in the spirit also under the influence of Jacques Derrida, the dissemination theory developed by Jacques Derrida. And the project takes its origin in this drawing. You can see the implosion of the cube. And the drawing can show you all the process. And also, Tchoumi in Le Parc de la Villette will deconstruct all the codes also of the drawing because you have the line, you have the dot line surface related to the Vitruvian codes, and Tchoumi will be completely dissociate all these elements. And it will be the same for the model. At the end, you will have something completely dissociated, fragmented. And the model is not an object to build something, but it's something related to the process of the architect. And in this sense, it's really something critical, reflexive, and not a tool for anticipation for the project. And now I arrive, in the 90s period, and you have some blobs of Greg Lynn that we show in the Archilab exhibition in Orléans in '99. And you know that I was quickly talking about the status of model, and of course with the use of the computer, it will completely change. And during really a long time, the model was something always related to the mimesis, always related to the mimetism, to something analogical. And with the use of computer, it will be something introverted, involuted in the process of the computer. As you know, the design project now has nothing to do with representation, but with calculation, with computation. And of course, it will change everything. Now we have algorithm, we have parametric calculation, genetic code, and of course, it will change the relationship to the model. And the model, the drawing, will refer in fact to the process and refer more to the process than to the reality of construction. And the use of also these, I would say, digital tools will also put the emphasis on, as you know, an evolutionary approach of architecture. And the maquette will become, of course, an element for experimentation. And maybe it will be closer to a prototype than something related to the idea of prefiguration. And I choose these blobs of Greg Lynn because we can really see a paradigmatic change for the model, because we will have a completely change about the design method and also the production of architecture. And these animated shapes, as Greg Lynn was calling them, will also show us the change of the set. It's difficult to see on the walls, but on the walls you have the matrix of the model. So it's a kind of grammar, generative grammar, and you have this grammar which is explained, in fact, through different types of maquettes. And you have the imprint, you have the casting, and so you have this blob, and you have I would say different kind of object, and everything is at the end something related to the notion of the model, but nothing is really a model, of course, in this kind of new topographies that Greg Lynn will develop. And what is also interesting is that the model is something close to the idea of transformation. Now, what is important is not the idea of an object, because the maquette is not anymore an object, but it is something which will put the accent on the transformational potential, in fact, of the object, because all the blobs are transforming each other in the process. You see, for instance, this kind of not maquette, of course, and you can see this potential of transformation all the time. And so these objects, these maquettes, are not at all mimetic objects, but they are inclusive or intensive objects, and which are already there, I would say, in the digital process. And François Roche, because it illustrates a kind of contextual way of looking at architecture. And also because he will try to develop projects in an evolutionary way, and also to integrate this, I would say, an anthropic dimension of reality in the project. Here it is a project for the French electricity enterprise, and it is a tower. Of course, it's a kind of homage to Archigram. You can plug or unplug the structure. You have photovoltaic cells, thermal sensor. So it's something completely moving all the time and changing all the time. And for François Roche, the project and the model are also contextual. And I will quote François Roche: "The project no longer results from an abstract projection, but from a distortion of the real." And then again, for this, his project for the Bangkok Contemporary Art Foundation, François Roche will conceive a building with a kind of electric mesh, which will create an electrostatic effect, and then it will absorb all the pollution of the city. You can see this device. And at the end, there is no more architecture. Architecture completely disappears. And again, we are back to this idea that architecture has no predefined form. There is no more a priori form. And you can see here also where is the model, where is the maquette. It's completely impossible to tell. Everything has completely disappeared under all these layers, because architectural models are completely in interaction with the environment. And here is a prototype of Bernard Cache, Objectile. You know surely that Gilles Deleuze, in his book Le Pli, The Fold, published in 1888, in fact wrote about this new technological object that he called Objectile. And Bernard Cache was maybe one of the first in the late 80s, which was quite early, to develop variable shapes. And of course with the computerized machines, and then specific singular object can be produced at in an industrial scale. And in this kind of approach, the notion of model, prototype, architecture will be also completely changed, because we will find a kind of horizontal concatenation of all the phases of design and production. And so digital tools will move us directly from the design of object to the production. And I took the example of Decoy, which is also a very early maquette, 91. And Mark Goulthorpe was in this first research trying to also use the maquette, the model of something criticizing again the modernism, of course here with the use of glass. And after Mark Goulthorpe developed a kind of elastic space, you know that he was developing emerging space, autoplastic architecture, which is, I would say, also a kind of environment. And this kind of maquette was, I would say, the first step of his research. And it is interesting also because in this kind of project, like the glass vessel, you can see that the space is no longer represented. The space is something cognitive, and you will find in this idea, of course, in many different projects. Cerveau will work also with the new tools, and also here we have a kind of disappearance of the really what is could be a maquette. The maquette becomes something transactional between, I would say, the domestic and also the urban dimension. And it is a photo of the non-standard taken in the non-standard architecture exhibition. And for all these architects dealing with this kind of tools, of course the accent is put on the idea of adaptation, transformability of architecture. And Cerveau is using, for instance, its LobbyPort, the LobbyPort project. It's a kind of informative wall panel that you put on the facade of a hotel, and then you can also produce at the industrial scale this kind of project. And what is also important in the design process of Cerveau is this relationship between the body and the technology. And also this idea of that the architecture became a transformational system. And here it's one of the first interactive architecture which was built in 1994 by Lars Spuybroek, Knox, in the Netherlands. It is the freshwater pavilion. And what is funny to see is we have a kind of craftsman model, not something at all technological for this interactive architecture that Lars Spuybroek was developing at that time. And for Knox, in fact, the model is something organic. He talks about organic machine, and the digital model will be consecutive, in effect. So it's the building. And another project, and you know, in his model, Lars Spuybroek was talking about machining procedure, and he was referring to Fraiotto technique. Maybe you recognize this kind of technique developed in the 60s, and by soaking rubber tubes, in fact, in wet lacquer, and you have this kind of aggregation. And Knox, in all this recent project, is really working on the idea of self-generating techniques, and also for the model. And what is interesting, first, it's the empirical approach or research, which is important. And then after, you will have a digital issue, which will be developed. And Knox also usually uses strips of paper strip that he will cut and he will assemble, and then all this wooden strip will be converted into algorithm. But then it's first an empirical, I would say, approach with the hands, and after it will become calculation and an algorithm result. And of course, these models, this kind of process is interesting for the status of the maquette because, again, we don't have any more projective dimension or representation as we can understand. And the model is something completely a kind of evolving organism. Here it's young French and Spanish architect, Desedo. And this installation expresses also the ambiguity between manual technique, between manufacturing procedures. In fact, these wooden strips are kind of visualization of what happened in the screen, in the black screen of the architects. It's not a maquette, it's not a prototype. It just takes us back to the architect's design process. And with this ambiguity or interface between the design and the production. Here we have a project by Marcos Novak, and now Marcos Novak is trying to analyze using nanotechnology, using, of course, technology, and working with rapid prototyping machines. And the model for him also is something completely different because the model for him is functioning like a living system, like a living and dynamic system, and which is also a means to explore this transformation of the architectural process. And so the title phylogenetic state is because the model will become something sedimentary construction, which will refers in fact to an always differential state. It's not anymore a frozen object, but it refers to this differential state, phylogenetic state. And you have here a maquette by Xephirotarch, Hernan Diaz Alonso, and working, of course, also about the evolutionary computational systems. And the model will be the exact copy of what appears on the computer screen. You have an exact correspondence between what you see on the screen and what you will, of course, manufacture through the prototyping machine. And the models, the Xephirotarch models using stereolithography are, of course, not at all sculptures, and they are something completely different. They are, I would say, organism without any organ also. You can see this kind of skeleton with the connective elastic space envelope that he will develop. And again, we find this idea of model as a phylogenetic machine, something which is more close to the idea of metabolism. And here you have a chair made by EasyCity, Philippe Morel. He surely explained to you his design process. And this chair is very interesting because, of course, it's not a piece of furniture, it's not a prototype, it's not a model, a maquette, it's something completely over all these categories. And as you know, Philippe Morel is exploring all the genetics, all the biotechnologies. And what is very important for him is that the object is is something completely literal. So you use a machine and you will produce something which is on the same level, on the same semantic level, in fact. And the object that you will see is really the exact visualization also of the computational method. It's nothing more. And that is important because during a long time, centuries, models was a kind of, I would say, des objets transcendentaux. I don't know if you understand in French. In this project of EasyCity, for instance, you don't have, I would say, any transcendentalism of the form. form of the object is something completely literal. And then it's also something completely in opposite with all this representational tradition of architecture. And so the maquette is really on the same immediate scale of that which will be built. And so it could manifest in this way. Quickly, some other models to finish the talk. Ocean North, you know, of course, as Michael is teaching here. And we will find again the biological paradigm and architecture, which is a kind of threshold and a dynamic threshold, and not anymore also an object. And the idea, of course, of the model will be something close to the idea of the ecosystem, something which will be close to a dynamic relationship between many different parameters, the material, the structures, and so on. And you know also Philippe Ram, because I think he was teaching here during a period. And in Philippe Ram also design, it's interesting because you have this emphasis on the idea of atmosphere that we can remember the constant notion of atmosphere. And Philippe Ram will use all what is invisible, that is to say the biological, electromagnetic exchange between our body, between the architecture. And again, the space is something cognitive, and we don't have a formal approach of architecture. It is another installation working of the idea of light, because it was, you see, as you were in the mountain and having all the reaction in the mountain. And this way of working with the climate, here is la Maison Mollier. And la Maison Mollier has no predefined form because it is only the notions of, I would say, if it is dry, if it is cold, if it is hot, which will determine all the different space and chambers. And so you don't have anymore an object or a representation, but just these atmospheric conditions. And so to conclude, I would tell that what we can notice in all these different examples is that maybe the notion of inherence. And by inherence, I would say that the model will refer to something which is inclusive to the process of the architect, more than something which is a referent or an exteriority. And we will also retain, I would say, this idea of horizontality between the design and the production methods of architecture. And these similarities, this idea of simultaneity is important because it will permit this idea of a generative and evolutionary process also for architecture. And models will be in this sense something which is completely transforming themselves in a cognitive field which is not anymore a formal field for architecture. And the model will be something more close to, I would say, maybe an agent, a vector, in a genetic process which is marked by the idea of transformability, adaptability, and which will allow to dynamic architectural systems. And so in this sense, I call the talk and the model phylogenetic machine because the model will move and give move also to the design process of the architects. Thank you. And sorry again for my English, but you survive. Yes?
Are there any questions? I would have maybe just a couple of comments to kick it off. I think it was really a fabulous,
In French?
fabulous summary of kind of not only just the history, but the kind of contemporary practices of modeling in a kind of broadest sense, which kind of I'd love to hear a little bit more about the kind of contemporary techniques in ways that modeling shifts from the production of a representation to either the potential for its performative conditions. I mean, you kind of cite the kind of stages of material computation over the 20th century and more recent kind of modes or prototyping or relationship, a closer relationship to industrial design and other kind of material productions, to a kind of fascination with a kind of digital realm of which can either take its mode of animate kind of techniques to simulation and really seeing much more the kind of performative conditions of a model as a kind of relationship to, or set of relations to what you can broadly say are parameters. Really very interesting summary. There are a couple of questions though, so there might be a microphone just behind you.
Speak in English?
Yes, first in French.
No, I'll say it in English. You're perfectly capable of following. I mean, I'm really delighted with the menagerie of models that you've shown. I mean, your selection of models is I don't know if it's necessary. I was just saying that I really like the menagerie of models that you showed. I also like the method that you followed in order to introduce us to the notion of a radical transformation of the model status from being representational and mimetic to being something else. And but actually I almost totally disagree with that, if I may. I think it's almost impossible for the model to emancipate itself from this representational assumption, whether it is on the point of view of the observer or the maker of a model itself. I think it is embedded in the nature of a model. And therefore I think that although your dialectical presentation is useful, and I find it actually, it provides a thread which is very seductive, I'm almost thinking continuously the opposite. I'm thinking that the model that you showed to start with, the beautiful model of Michelangelo showing his very detailed representational model of a church, if you see it in the context of Michelangelo's work, is just as much a generative system, it's just as much an exploratory process. And what we're seeing here is the illusion of a moment of fixation of a model, but the culture behind it is the same culture as you find in Markus Novak. It's the same constant search for alternatives, for the whole dynamic of a process of invention, as you say in your lecture. And I think this is very important to realize. That's also, if you look at Michelangelo's total oeuvre and all his experimental models, all his completely radical inventive models, which are not yet representational because they're inventions. So at the one end of the scale, Michelangelo's model is everything but mimetic, although it is also mimetic. And at the other end of the scale, if you take some of your later examples, Markus Novak, whom we know well, is also somebody who cannot help, in a way, also thinking of what he produces being the prefiguration of something that might be built. Even Novak, let alone Schumann. I mean, you're not talking about just a mental process of combination and permutations, etc. You're talking about prefiguration in the same way that you're saying that, in the 16th century or whatever, the model was limited to that row. Now, I'll stop here.
Yeah, because you are right and not also, because I think that there is point of disruption, for instance, with the modernism during the avant-garde period, because then the model becomes something autonomous, an object for itself. And that was completely different from the past and from the Renaissance period as a representational tool. And for me, there is a break also with the use of calculation, computation, a bit, because the notion of form is not really the same, of course, than the notion of the form, I would say, 4 centuries ago. And in the same way that the Carceri or some drawings of the 18th century, Boulet, I don't know, completely changed the status of the drawing also. So I think that, of course, we can say that the model will continue and to remain a kind of model, but I think that there is point of rupture also, yes, and with some period very important for both drawing and the model. But it's, yes, we can discuss. And I gave a very quick talk also, and trying to summarize the different things which are important to develop also, of course, more longer.
I just want to challenge the way in which you present mimesis and representation. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Michael Taussig. Michael Taussig is an anthropologist. He wrote his book Mimesis and Alterity. And what I think would be useful is to try and move beyond this simple notion of representation and maybe subject the model to a kind of psychoanalysis of the model. By that I mean not simply that the model is always a kind of fetish object and therefore seen within a kind of certain sort of way, but I mean, as Taussig talks about it, the origin of the work of art is always something which is a kind of object of magic. When they painted these animals on the cave walls, it was to conjure up the animals they wanted to hunt. And you think about maybe the very first representations of models, which were kind of in the medieval paintings of a patron who would carry a model of a building that was going to be built, and so on. And I think what Taussig does is he kind of destabilizes that simplistic notion of a kind of scaled down version of reality and adds into it some kind of, shall we say, sort of magical impulse, in the sense that the voodoo model is invested with something of, and I think that you have to kind of like maybe underwrite that account of models with an alternative interpretation of mimesis and representation.
Yes, you are right. Because the first model, which are not scale model, were votive and magic models. And I think, not the Maya, but in South America, we can find use of models in a magic way during the Neolithic period. I read that we discover a trace of what could be a model, and it was used in a magic completely way, and not at all a representational or on scale model. And but I don't speak about this dimension also of the model. Yeah.
Sorry. If we go to the last set of examples where really rapid prototyping is allowing the production of the literal production of the computer model into a physical model. If we see how exactly they do reproduce the 3D model, what is it really adding to the design process or to the architect, besides the fact that you can show it and they're usually quite beautiful? But what is it adding to the architect? And in that case, if they really become a physical version of the same thing, isn't it the model really the one inside the computer? And in that case, obviously, what's the difference between model and drawing, if there is any difference at the moment?
Yeah, for instance, for Philippe Morel, he's telling that the model doesn't add anything. Yes, it just it is this idea. Yes, that there is nothing added. In fact, because it's just the result of the calculation, and that's it. And I just point to the fact that there is no more this idea of transcendental or transcendentalism, idea related to the model and something above, and it's something recurrent in the, I would say, the architectural discourse that we can find. It's just horizontal, and it's just the visualization of the process, and that's it. And yes, of course, we can discuss this point, but I noticed this ideas many times talking to some architects.
I think maybe it's a relevant point, I think, in the context of an architecture school, that Eduardo, you're critiquing the kind of visualization of using computational manufacturing or tools, and that's maybe using the term manufacturing quite generously, rather just representations of a digital model in either 3D prints or very small scales. But I think there's a greater potential to kind of link the architectural model as a digital model to its potential manufacturing using these kinds of tools at scales beyond that of a highly reduced miniature, but rather being able to address the potential of manufacturing of a kind of one-to-one. So I think there is a kind of limit maybe in terms of scaling that, I would also agree that the kinds of little miniature jewelry pieces of 3D prints that we see around also of my students are are also something that we critique, of a kind of clear limit of what those kinds of models are able to do beyond visualizing what in a computer space is just something we can move around and still see as a kind of flat screen. But I think there is the potential to kind of use what are effectively tools brought from automotive and aerospace and naval architecture kind of industries and industrial design, etc., to the production of architectural form, space, etc.
I didn't intend it like a critique or any sort of a
critique.
Also, I wanted to point out what's the difference if the model itself is what is already inside the computer. What's the difference between that and a drawing? If there was at any point a difference. It's not just the fact that well, they are the same or not. Is if whatever you have in front of you is a model, what's the difference between that and a drawing?
Possibly.
I don't know.
I mean, I think if you see just a drawing as a representation rather than a description, but I think that the way that maybe industrial designers use the kinds of technologies of physical three-dimensional visualization that you're talking about might be more to do with the ways that you can prototype and test in the sense of a kind of instantaneous description along the process of design. But that's not necessarily the way that you're critiquing the use of these kinds of technologies, which I, is a relevant critique. Michael, I think is first.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the first comment, which somehow reminded me of this American guy that Tom and I studied with some 15 years ago, who upon walking into the building here said, well, you guys don't get it right. You still call this program Histories and Theories. It should be called Histories or Theories, because histories will try to prove that everything has already been done, therefore there won't be anything new, whereas theories searching for the new. And if we let this kind of half cliche, half truism sort of stand for a moment, it would be interesting to look at the development of the models somehow in a more recent period, where there's first indications that we go from this kind of the king is dead, long live the king attitude of rejecting what maybe certain modes of working have looked for beforehand and looking then for different things to be represented, into a mode that is more synergetic or more incorporating in a sense. And there were some traces of this, and so along these lines it would actually be really quite interesting, I would assume, for maybe FRAC to co-commission maybe Philip Rahn and RNC to really basically say what happens if we just now totally abandon somehow the rejection of that what was before, and we look at the material and the atmospheric, the ecological and the programmatic, etc., these kind of things together. So I was wondering whether you have any thoughts and any plans on kind of driving this work further?
Yes, we would like to do it one time, but for instance, Philippe Borel is using the Mathematica software, and the idea was to give him a kind of command and to realize a prototype house just made by Mathematica, but at the real scale, and yes, so not the I would say the project, and but the architecture. And Philippe Rahn, yes, the opportunity. He never found the opportunity to really realize what he wanted to do, and we would love to be able to help the architect to develop their design process until this step, I would say, and I hope that one time we will be able to do it. Yeah, because it's very important also.
One last question.
I was interested in your use of language.
Not the English.
Well, no, it's not as simple as that, because I'm not a native English speaker myself. So you were interchanging between model and maquette. And in, let's say, the kind of tradition of art, that would indicate a completely different sphere.
Yes, yeah.
And of course, maquette being really something much more representational, or a model being something much more conceptual. And in the processes or practices of art, model would always be something that you refer to. So the life model in the 19th century, and let's say now it would be, people like Derrida or Deleuze, who are our models. So I just wondered why is it really that in kind of architectural discourse, model and maquette are the
Yes,
same thing?
you know, in French there is just both maquette and model. There is no really semantic difference. In English you use, I don't know, mainly model or maquette. What do you use? Model, yes. And so yes, I would say in French it's maybe maquette. But about the etymology. The etymology, maquette came from macchietta in Italian, which is a term, I don't know in English, une tâche, quand on tâche un tissu, macchietta, ça signifiait cela. And model came from modulus, modulus in Latin, and it's related to the Roman Vitruvian also time. And so all these different terms has a different story in France, because maquette, for instance, in the 18th century, will be also related to scenographical device, to a kind of real scale device for the theater, for instance, different things like this. And so it could be very interesting to